This is The Storied Outdoors, a podcast somewhere between Lewis and Tolkien and Lewis and Clark, finding clarity in the stories we tell and the adventures that shape us. Welcome to The Storied Outdoors. My name is Brad Hill, and man, I'm joined by my pal Brian Gill up in Birmingham, and I'm down in Mobile, and we are joined today. Man, we're so excited to talk to somebody new and somebody that does something different that I have never done or even attempted to do, or thought about attempting to do. But we're excited to hear about it today from Jacob Holsonback. Grew up in Pace, Florida. Grew up with a good pal of mine, Ryan Perzine. Some of you that listen may know Ryan, but Ryan's a dear friend of mine, and that's how we found out about Jacob. And he's one of the managers at Innerlight Surf Shop in Pensacola, Florida. They have 4 locations, 2 in Pensacola, 1 in Gulf Breeze, and 1 in Destin, Florida. And when summertime hits and rolls around, Jacob is not only at the surf shop, but he also runs a surf camp that's put on by the shop, which sounds really cool. And so, man, you love surfing, and that's fascinating to me. And man, it's not something I've ever done or really know anything about. So I'm here. We're here to learn. We're here to learn and hear from you and hear about your story. Jacob, man, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I know it's kind of been a little while in the works getting me on here. I remember my brother-in-law, Brett Glover, mentioned it to you, and I was super interested. And so I've been looking forward to it for a while now.
That's right, man. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah,
right on time.
Welcome. And you know, when I hear somebody say Pace, Florida, my ears perk up. My family's from Bruton, Alabama, so
okay.
We're right across the line from you guys, and just a lot of good memories down there.
Yeah, funny you say that. My family is from Atmore.
Oh yeah, great.
Yeah, so I've been through Bruton several times in my life. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's funny. So funny. We had Sean Diedrich on here, and he said everybody's been through Bruton and knows somebody from Bruton at some point in their life.
Yeah, that's so true, man.
I'd be willing to bet your family knows some of mine for sure.
We could play that game for a long time, I bet.
Yeah, I need to call my grandma and he can talk shop with her.
Yeah. There you go.
Oh man, so when you think about surfing, the Gulf Coast is not really the first thing that comes to mind. Honestly, in my opinion, it's not as known for the waves because they're bigger in other parts of the world. So like, how did you find your way into surfing? What drew you into that?
So you are correct. I don't think that when people think of surfing in Florida, the Panhandle is not their first thought. I think people would probably definitely assume or associate that with more the East Coast for sure. And the East Coast gets really, really good. And it's more consistent than here. But when the Gulf is on, it can be a very sought after spot. You just kind of our windows are much smaller.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as how I got into it, previously, what Brad mentioned, my best friend growing up is Ryan Perzine, and he was on staff with Brad at Mars Hill, and he now is the lead pastor at a church in downtown Mobile. And so I believe his mom is the one that started that whole group in surfing or whatever, because it was Ryan and a bunch of neighborhood guys, and they just kind of caught the bug. And for whatever reason, I never got the invite. Me and Ryan were always good friends, but I had a neighborhood crew that I hung out with a lot, and me and Ryan played sports together, went to school together, and so it's not like we didn't talk, but I just never got the invite for whatever reason. I don't know. But
sounds like something deeper to need to talk about there.
get him on here, right? But I went with 2 guys that mutual friends of mine and Ryan's in high school, and once I did that, it was kind of like you kind of walk into a whole new world. All of our close friends grew up surfing. Like I said, I was just kind of out of the picture for some reason, but a lot of mutual friends surfed, and so yeah, I mean, you kind of just get the bug and you don't really look back. But I didn't dive into it really until I was in college. I'm pretty late bloomer if you really sit back and look at the timeline of everything, I kind of wish I could go back and change a few things, but yeah, kind of late, but I'm pretty invested right now.
Just to kind of follow up on that a little bit, surfing along the Florida Panhandle, is that a new phenomenon? Is that, comparatively speaking to the West Coast?
No, so the shop I work at, Innerlight, is actually over 50 years old.
How about that? Okay.
Yeah, so the guy that founded it, his name was Yancey Spencer. He started it in Gulf Breeze, Florida, so right over the bridge from where I'm at right now in Pensacola. So we've had a very heavy footprint in the surf community here along the Gulf Coast, and then there are now three other shops that are thriving. All three of us do really well. It's us, Waterboys, and Maverick. They're all in the Pensacola and Gulf Breeze area as well, and so there's definitely some roots in the surf scene out here on the Gulf. It's just we just fly under the radar because it's so inconsistent here.
Hmm.
Mm. Nothing like a good hurricane, I'm sure, to get you stirred up, huh?
Yeah, I mean it's that's a tough one, like I mean,
I'm sure.
anybody that's grown up on the Gulf, like in the area, it is, you don't wish a storm on anybody.
Hmm.
Those things are absolute worst.
Yeah.
I really have a, like my mom's house flooded during Hurricane Sally. And so like I've got a very bitter taste during
Hmm.
hurricane season, like that's just not something that's fun to deal with. But when the opportunity arises and like you have a window, like you gotta go, like.
That's right.
But it doesn't mean I want one coming down our throat, like I'd much rather have a hurricane season that has no storms coming in the Gulf.
Yeah.
Hmm. For
Yeah,
sure.
no, absolutely. Yeah, surfing seems to have its roots in sort of a pure form of enjoyment. Just like it's like asking somebody to, say what's the point of candy, right?
Right.
There's no point. It's enjoyment. It's
Hmm.
fun. Is that off base or is there something more to it?
No, I think that it's one of the funnest activities that you could ever try. I don't think that it's limited to gender. I think both males and females can be very, very successful in it. I think all different heights, body types, like there's no restriction on it, but I think the core of it is fun. I hope that a lot of people would be in agreement with that, because that's ultimately like what makes you want to do any hobby, it's fun, and it kind of keeps things like in perspective. But I mean, there's probably some people that do have some deeper like values within it. But yeah, I mean,
Sure.
it's so fun. Like, there's nothing like it. You can't really describe it. You
Yeah, I mean,
gotta
I've even
do it.
seen a dog. You've seen a dog do it before, catching a
Yeah,
wave.
yeah, go viral.
They look
Some
like
of
they're
those,
having a good time.
yeah, those
Yeah,
long. I love those pictures of those guys on those long boards. It's like basically like a big paddle board, and they got their dog on the front of it, and just loving life, man. It's incredible.
yeah, yeah. I've never seen that. I know those videos just take off. It's kind of like you kind of want to try it just to see if you can make some cash, right?
Oh
Man,
man.
the closest I've ever been to surfing is wake surfing, behind a
Okay.
boat. And,
Yeah.
and the only, I let go of the rope, but it was as I was falling. So it's not like I'm a good at this type of sport. But I mean, just being up there and being kind of pushed by the wave and propelled, that's a weird feeling where you're kind of in control, but you're really not in control, or you kind of just
Right.
you're going with it. How would you describe that sensation of surfing to someone who's never done it before?
Well, I think it's one of the most addicting things that like you could ever have. I think I've read like some studies that like it's something to do with like the chemicals that like happen in your mind or something like that are triggered that are also involved with like other things that would be addictive. Like I've personally never done drugs. I swear, like I'm never, never touched any of those. But like I've heard stories about how addicting a certain drug can be, and like you just can't leave it alone. It's the only thing that is kind of getting you through your day. And it can be the most addicting thing ever when like you figure out just when to paddle, when to pop up, and now you're riding the wave. And then once you progress from there and you start connecting the dots, like, oh, now I can go right or I can go left and I can do this and do that. It's just like everything's just kind of like evolving from there, and you just don't want to give it up because like for me, like surfing is fun. Like back to what Brad was saying, like the root of it is very fun. I thoroughly enjoy it, but progression is something that really drives me too. Like I really want to progress in certain areas, and so like it's just it's like an abyss. Like you can't really just describe it without feeling it. It's almost like you're floating.
Yeah.
And like you're able to control the way you're going too. Kind of like what's that Disney movie with the magic carpet?
Yeah. Yeah.
Aladdin, right?
Yeah.
Aladdin.
Yeah.
Aladdin. Yeah.
Kind of like you're on a magic carpet.
That makes sense. I mean, that visually makes sense. I think about, I think the closest thing I would imagine from someone who knows zero about surfing, other than a good old body surf. I mean, anybody's that's a kid that's gone to the beach. We've all caught a wave and body surfed right into the sand, And so that's as close as I've come to surfing. But it makes me think about balancing on a bicycle, which I've spent an awful lot of time on a bicycle. And so I think there's a similarity that's there of, downhill and on a road bike, you get, and what you're talking about earlier, I would imagine is the dopamine hit that you get.
Yeah. Dopamine
from this sort of the pleasure gland of your, brain's just pumping out dopamine.
Yeah.
And it's, you're getting that hit and man, you just want some more of that,
Big
and
time.
so it makes you come back for over and over and again. And, but to me, I think it would be close to riding a bike. There's balance involved. There's speed involved. There's wind involved. And
right.
There's, I've written about road cycling before and riding a bike, when you're a kid, there's physics to it. Yes. But it also kind of feels magical, and there's a fine line between magic and science sometimes. And riding a bike feels like that. I would imagine that getting up on, especially a sizable wave that would normally, and here's the unique thing to me that I think would normally be terrifying. Right. The waves are scary, if you're on the receiving end of them, because they can crush you if they're really large.
Yep.
And really hurt you. But when you're riding on something like that, I can see where that would be awfully exhilarating, because there is this potential for danger, but then there's also the fun being had by those that ride on the waves.
Yeah, big time adrenaline rush for sure. And like especially when it's big, it's like I'm sure you guys have heard like athletes talk about like when they're in a high pressure situation, everything just kind of like slows down and they don't hear anything. They're just so locked in that like nothing can go wrong. And so like when you're on or when you're surfing and the surf is big, it's kind of like you kind of just go into a different gear than when it's smaller, because you kind of have to be more on top of your game, because the last thing you want is to get pounded out there, you know what I mean? And getting held down isn't fun. And so you want to try to avoid that. And if you're surfing over like a rock or a reef, that's a whole different ball game. Surfing
Sharp,
over
super sharp.
So yeah, it's the adrenaline is huge. That's probably why people keep coming back.
I would imagine it's like people that skydive, it's like, we ain't gonna jump out of a perfectly good airplane,
Right? It's like, why can't we go somewhere cool?
So there was this I was talking to this guy the other day at Sanford, and he was talking about this whole concept of flow. And it's like whenever you do something really hard, that you're able to kind of overcome or achieve, and then you kind of get into this rhythm, and it's like it gives you this confidence, and that you're really it's kind of, it's called flow, and it's like I feel like that's kind of what you're alluding to. It's like this you hit this huge wave and you're doing it right, and you just kind of, it's almost like you can't do any wrong in the
Right.
it's just like your body is reacting and you're in the flow. And I love the thought of that and kind of this idea of, I mean, literally going with the flow. I mean, that kind of seems
Yeah.
like the culture as well as the experience.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I wouldn't say that I'm like an exceptional surfer, so I don't know if I could say I've achieved that flow state where it's like you're not doing anything wrong, but I've definitely had my fair share of getting smoked out there. But like it's just cool to like when the wind is good or like the crowd's not very like it's not busy out there, like the crowd's pretty thin and you're having a good time, but like if the surf can still be big and you can still kind of lock in and like kind of do what you're trying to accomplish, it's really cool to like sit back and think about like what your mind's doing and how your body is reacting to it. It's kind of mind blowing when you really think about it.
Hmm.
To me, as we're talking, it makes me think about. It feels like you're. I don't want to say taming, but it feels like you're. It is something that's much larger than you, much more powerful than you, and
Big
it's
time.
like you're cheating a little bit by riding on top of it. Because it doesn't care that you're there. Like it's ambivalent, right? But man, it will
Right.
crush you if you're beneath it. And it's like you borrowed something you're probably not supposed to borrow almost, but it's like, well, that's part of what makes it fun. Because, there's nothing more like, there's nothing quite like being out in the ocean that makes you feel small.
Big time.
Um,
And like when you sent me when we were talking and like you're like I think something that gets brought up a lot, like especially if you talk to somebody that goes to church, and or that has like a faith background, like I've never felt any smaller than being out in the water,
Hmm.
and like that's whether you're on a surf trip or you're surfing at home, and like when the surf's big, especially, it's kind of like when you really feel that way. It's like, man, like there's like, who am I to think that I'm truly in control? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like it's just, it's crazy, like to think that all that stuff is created by something that's a higher being, and that higher being still loves and cares about every single one of us.
Wow.
I remember,
Well said.
I remember distinctly during Ironman Florida in Panama City, um, during the swim portion, which is in the Gulf. It was in the morning. It was early morning start, and we're a half mile offshore. We go a half mile offshore, and we would swim south, and then come back in the other half mile. We did that 2 times, so it was a 2.4 mile swim. But you're a half mile offshore, and man, I felt so tiny out there in that water. The swells were large; they were over our heads. It was in November,
Hmm.
and so they were over our heads. So we had to dolphin through them to get out into the water to be able to swim. And then we had to sight. If you ever do any open water swimming, which you would probably understand, like trying to go somewhere straight, you got to pop up and see where you're going, make sure you're swimming straight.
Hmm.
And I would have to do that at the top of the swell because if I did it at the bottom, I couldn't see anything but a wall of water.
Yeah.
And man, it was scary and wild, and it was amazing, but it was terrifying because man, every time I put my face in that water, I just, I would see jellyfish or I would see other kinds of fish beneath me, and I kept waiting on jaws to come up, and
No.
just, I mean, all my buddies leading up to it too. Several of my friends were very kind to send me, articles about how guys had caught sharks off the beach down there, and here I am fixing to go swim in the Gulf for 2.5 miles. So
It's a
that was
very humbling feeling
it
being in the
really is
water.
because you're
Like,
the
Hmm.
bottom. You're the bottom of the food chain. You are not in charge.
yeah.
You are a mere visitor.
And like
You're a land animal.
and
Yeah,
like to even think about like the Gulf being as small as it is,
Right,
I
right.
know like when like you look at it on the map, like, oh, the Gulf's huge, but then you look over and it's like, oh, there's the Atlantic,
there's the
like
Atlantic.
giant,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
so like you can be in the water and you just look out and you can just look as far as you can see and not see anything but water.
Hmm.
Tiny, just a
Yeah,
speck.
very humbling for sure.
Indeed. What is I mean, you work in a surf shop and you spend a lot of time around, folks that would call themselves surfers. I think that Ryan was the first person that I met that would have called himself, somebody who surfs, a surfer,
Yeah.
that like has a surfboard, not a boogie board, but it's like a real surfboard and would go actually chase waves. I remember them watching they would have their apps open and they would be looking at the weather. I'm looking at the weather going, is the wind blowing so too hard to fish?
Right.
They were going, what direction is the wind blowing? Is it making good waves? And
Yep.
and they would they would be going. So I'd never experienced that until Ryan, so that was new for me. But I got a little bit of the sense of what that community was like from Ryan. But what is that like surfing community like?
I mean, I kind of feel like it would be like any other sport, I kind of think about it with basketball, for example. So, I mean, you think about like, let's say Rucker Park in New York, like one of the most famous street ball basketball courts in the history of the United States, like you've got guys there that like are solid basketball players. And if I'm gonna go up there, like I'm not gonna get to just go run with like these guys that like this is their neighborhood. This is their court. I mean? You kind of have to work your way into that, and show that like, hey, like, all right, he can play, like he can play if he really wants to. We need an extra guy, like bring him in, and then like as you like show like your consistency, show that you can actually hang, you kind of just work into that whole group of guys that can actually like hold it down at Rucker Park, And that's kind of how it is here. I feel like it's a very unique community. I feel like the surf scene is, you have guys that might be surfing this home break for they've been there their whole life, and like they always tell stories about, oh, it used to be like this, or this year we had the best sandbars, blah blah blah, like just kind of like they put their time in, they deserve the respect, and then you've got guys that just bought a board 2 days ago at the shop, and they're going to go paddle out and hope to have this like great experience, but then they get out there and it's like, whoa, this is really crowded. These guys can actually surf, it can be really intimidating. And then you got guys that like are new in town, like around here we have a lot of military personnel coming through, with all the bases and stuff in the area. And so it like they have to work their way in just like somebody else does. And so it's super unique here. I think that there are more friendly faces than non-friendly faces. But I do think that you kind of have to like work your way in and be respectful out in the water, to kind of like get there, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I'm
having visions of Point Break. I'm gonna be real honest. Cards on the table. I'm
Okay.
having visions of Point Break, and like, man, they were fighting over waves, and so like is there some of that real competitive like spirit of that, or is that just like cinema like hyping things up a little bit?
When the surf's good, it can be very competitive, and I don't, and like I'm not trying to make Pensacola sound like it's North Shore of Hawaii.
Sure.
Like we are a very small drop in the world of surf, and like there's people in Hawaii and like Australia and like these places that get incredible waves, and like there's an actual like pecking order. Here, it's not so much like that. I think a lot of people would probably agree with me saying that we wish that there was a little more order out there, but when the waves are good, it can be very, very competitive. And like anywhere in the world, if there's a pier, that's normally where the better surfers surf, and it's kind of like the sand builds up a little bit quicker there than other spots because of the
Oh
pilings.
yeah,
And
right,
so
right.
that like that sandbar can be better there than other places along down the beach, and so all the better guys are going to go surf there. And that can just be a whole mixture of age and ability level, but everybody's fighting for a wave. And
Interesting.
especially here with it being so inconsistent,
Mhm.
like everybody's just out for blood sometimes. It's like, man, we haven't surfed in a month and a half. Like we're all like just
It's
like
been
chomping
totally
at the
flat
bit.
out.
Yeah. And so like as soon as there's a rideable wave, it's like it's kind of game on after that. But I don't think it's the worst surf community in the
Yeah.
world.
Would you say so I'm assuming that the answer is going to be one of these three, but like surfing in Pensacola versus surfing out in California, is one easier or are they different? Because I know that, I mean, when I'm seeing guys surfing in like lower waves, it's like a lot of work. It's like a lot of pumping and like, I mean, they're really working a lot harder, it seems like, than just like hitting a curl and just going. So I mean,
Right.
is there a difference? Is it easier, harder with a short, like a smaller wave? Or I mean, what's the difference in the, Gulf Coast and West Coast?
So for one, and I think the biggest reason is with the Gulf being so small and the way Florida and Central America are shaped, it kind of makes like a U
Hmm.
almost. And so when we get swell here, it's mainly wind driven. And so that's
Yeah.
why you can always see like there's always some type of chop on the water more times than not. At any point of the day, any time of year, the wind is what's creating our waves more
Hmm.
times than not. Now, if you have a hurricane swell that's like, the Yucatan Peninsula down there, the gap. So if there's a storm that kind of goes through the bottom of the Gulf, like going towards Mexico, for example,
It's pulling all that water.
right. So it's going to send us what we would call long period swell towards the whole Gulf Coast region. And so that would make that kind of wind wave factor almost disappear to a degree because you're getting the power of the storm sending waves.
Hmm.
But if you go to the West Coast, they almost always have some type of long period swell out there. And
Wow.
so in my mind, like I've been to the West Coast twice. I'm going back out there in 11 days.
Oh,
And so like
nice.
there's just always swell in the water,
Hmm.
because there's so much open ocean and there's always a storm somewhere out there that's sending swell. And so I think it's a lot easier to learn in a place where you have consistency because
Yeah.
the only way to master something is to truly like put in hours and hours and hours into it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But I do think if you were to learn to surf here on the Gulf Coast in the summertime, like when we do surf camp, it can be a prime place to learn because the waves are small, they're weak. You're not surfing over rocks, you're not surfing over a reef,
Hmm.
and it's really pretty water. It's normally
Yeah. Not
crystal clear.
quite as intimidating.
Right. The
Yeah.
intimidation factor is gone. And so it goes both ways, I feel like, but ultimately, I feel like it can be a lot easier to surf not on the Gulf.
Yeah, I can kind of get that. I mean, and this is gonna fail in so many levels, but like I learned to snow ski in West Virginia,
Mhm.
and then I go out to Big Sky, Montana, and it's a totally different experience. I mean, you're snow skiing on spring break in West Virginia on slush, and you're dodging mud puddles, but you're going out to Big Sky, and you're hitting some
Powder.
really good powder, and it's
Yeah.
just
Yep.
it's a little bit easier in some ways, but then you have the really intense bowl there, and it's just this, the mountains are so much bigger out there, and so like I think I can kind of see what you're saying, like the consistency of the conditions maybe make it a little bit easier out west, but then like
Big time.
also you got this whole intimidation factor. It's more approachable, it's doable over here in the Gulf. I like that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Well, and two on the West Coast, it's like it's so crowded out there.
Oh, okay.
Like
Hmm.
there are so many surfers in California. It's insane. And so if I feel like the mentality for a lot of beginners is nobody wants to look dumb at anything, whether it be ping pong or surfing or whatever, nobody wants to be made fun of. Nobody wants to be embarrassed. And so when you go to a place like California where the level of surfing is exponentially higher than anywhere in Florida,
Hmm.
and a lot of places on the East Coast, it's like, man, I don't want to paddle out there. Like those guys are doing airs over people. Like I don't want no part of that, And so that can be very, very intimidating for sure.
Tell us about you mentioned earlier. You mentioned the surf shop,
Mhm.
Innerlight.
Yep.
I like that name. Where did that name come from? That's really cool.
So, like I said, our founder was Yancey Spencer III, and he did not grow up in the church, but he did come to know Christ in his, I think it was his mid 20s, somewhere in that timeline for him. But when the shop started, that's what he wanted to call it because he had become a Christian at that point. And so, I mean, like anybody that's grown up in church or in, like they always talk about let your light shine, and so that's kind of where it came from, like let your inner light for Jesus kind of be, what people see more than anything. And
Mm.
so that's where the name comes from. But Yancey, he passed away in 2011. He was out in California and he was visiting his daughter, and he had a heart attack on the beach surfing one of his favorite places out there called County Line.
Hmm.
And so he was the owner, and then his younger brother, whose name was JB, he was our general manager at the time. And so when Yancey passed, ownership was split between his wife Lydia and his younger brother JB. And so JB is still very much in the picture. Lydia is too, but she's not as involved within the shop day to day operations as JB is. And so it's still very, very much in the family, though. Both of JB's daughters play a vital role for us. One of his daughters is our women's buyer. So if you're to come into Innerlight and you looked for your wives, like some type of clothing on the women's side of things, or a certain brand of shoes that she orders, she's the one that orders all that for all of our shops. And
Well, that's
then
cool.
his other daughter is our operations manager. So she does a lot of our behind the scenes stuff. Like we would sink without her. Like she carries so much weight, like she really does a great job for us. And his son was a manager for us for several years. Two of his grandchildren or three of his grandchildren worked for us. And so very, very family oriented at the shop.
That's cool. I love that picture of letting the light that's in you shine to those
Yeah.
around you. Man, I like that a lot.
Yeah. It's a good place to work. Like I'm very, very fortunate. I've been there for 9 years this summer.
Wow.
Um, and I don't mind going to work. I enjoy the people I work with. Like we've got full-time people, we've got part-time people, and like throughout the year and throughout the years, like we do have a turnover rate just like any other job would. I feel like a lot of people in the college age and high school age kind of use it just like a stepping stone part-time
Yeah,
job
sure.
type deal. But like the core group of employees that have been there for a while, like man, those like you can't beat working small business,
Hmm.
there's just something about it. It's different. Good
What
place
is
to be.
that? I love that. What? So, say somebody comes in there and they buy a board and they're just trying to get started. What is the one piece of advice that you give them?
To buy a bigger board than what you're probably thinking you need.
And why? And
Because
why is that? Yeah.
You got a 16 foot, about 8 feet wide for me.
yeah. No, we can make it happen for you. I know we could. I'm a firm believer that anybody can surf on the right board on the right conditions. So like I guarantee you we could get you up. But to answer your question, I, I feel like all the surf videos that people see, they're riding like a normal shortboard, so like a real pointy nose,
Hmm.
and it's probably like 6 foot or shorter,
Oh yeah,
and they're doing airs or doing turns, like they're
like a
surfing
skateboarder.
yeah, probably surfing somewhere really tropical, like a desired place to be. But in reality, that board is not meant for a beginner. That board is
Yeah.
meant for number one, a wave with a little power behind it, little size. And that person that's doing all those things on that board has probably been surfing for at least 10 years. Like
Hmm.
they put a lot of time into it, and they probably surfed in a place that allows them to get in the water like 300 days a year, or
Wow.
they have the ability to travel. And so when you have a longer board, it just makes the whole learning process much easier. So normally, like the general rule of thumb is you would ride a longboard in smaller surf conditions, And then as the surf gets bigger, your board size can drop because you're no longer having to depend on, like, the power of the wave is giving you the ability to ride a lesser board,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. Because like you don't need as much float, am I making any sense with that?
Yeah,
Oh,
that
Sort
that
of.
makes
that
total
makes
sense. Yeah.
perfect sense.
Okay. And so as a beginner, like, you wouldn't go out there when it's like a hurricane swell, for example. Like, that's how people get hurt,
Yes.
And so when you have a longboard, you're probably going to be surfing on days where it's like knee to thigh high, light winds, and you're able to just build a good solid foundation on something that's stable. It's going to paddle really well. You're going to catch waves so much easier and sooner than somebody on a small board would. And then once you're up and on your feet, it's going to be very predictable. It's not going to do anything that you don't want it to do.
Mm.
And so that's kind of like, that's my approach, and I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of people at the shop or that work at surf shops all over would probably agree with that.
Yeah,
That's cool.
that makes perfect sense. I mean, and the fact that you know how to guide people in that, I mean, that just shows the kind of services that a small business really provides. You know the water, you know the ins and outs of everything to be able to advise people like that. I love that. Um, I've got so many questions, Brad, and I know I'm going a
Go
little
for
bit
it.
off script.
All good.
But it's, one of the questions that I kind of been thinking about since we've been talking. What do you see as one of the main threats for the sport?
Um, I've heard, I'm like the biggest surf junkie. Like, gosh, like, you have no idea how much time I've spent on this computer watching surf videos and reading articles. Like, holy moly. Like, I sit back and I'm like, dude, you could have been way more productive with your time. But anyway, like, I just eat it up. I love it. But I've heard that, and like through surf podcasts that I listen to and articles I've read, that the art of glassing a board is kind of becoming less and less a desirable thing. So, like, when you have a surfboard, when you're shaping a surfboard, it's foam. You shape it to the length and the dimensions you're desiring,
Hmm.
and then after you shape it, you glass it, and so that's what makes it hard.
You putting
Once
fiber,
that,
I'm guessing that's fiberglass. Is that right?
right,
Yeah.
and the cloth and everything like that, and then once it
Hmm.
hardens, that gives you your surfboard essentially. And so when you buy a surfboard, you can either get one that's hand shaped. So, like, I've got a board behind me, my longboard, and a couple up against my wall over here that have been hand shaped. So a guy has shaped it himself. There hasn't been any machine, like, computer work done to it.
Hmm.
And then after that, they glass it. And so the glassing is super important. Like, anybody can learn how to shape, but glassing is really a whole nother world in itself. And so, in a podcast I listened to with a shaper out of Southern California, he says that it seems like that there's just not a whole lot of desire to learn that part of the thing,
Hmm.
the process. And so, if you think about it, like, if you don't have an adequate amount of glassers, like, what happens to all your surfboards?
Yeah.
Like, you can't really get them, and then obviously, like, I mean, I'm sure you guys have your own experiences just like anybody else does, but, like, nothing's cheap right now.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, like shipping costs, and then just the cost to actually, like, build a board, and labor costs, like, it's all pretty high right now. But, like, I don't think we're in danger of losing it, but I do kind of worry about, like, how
Like
many people,
sustainability.
yeah, like, how long people want to continue to learn to just grind out a bunch of boards and mow foam and then glass, and then kind of just, like, do it the old school way, because there's a lot of shapers that are able to do it with a computer now. Like, there's a whole system that you can just plug and play essentially, and then it will cut the board out, and then it's kind of ready to go.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you put it in like a CNC like machine, and
Yeah, exactly.
it just cuts it out for you. I mean, it
Right.
loses a little bit of that creator's touch to it.
Right.
the artisan side of, I can imagine, the fiberglass and glue and all that is not a very glamorous process, and it's pretty difficult if
Yeah.
I'm imagining correctly.
And I would agree with that. Like, I've never personally shaped a board. I watched more videos than I can count on just like kind of like maybe not necessarily the whole process from start to finish, but there's always like snippets of each part within the video, and like, I mean, you're on your feet a lot. You're hopefully wearing a mask so you're not inhaling all those
Yeah.
chemicals and stuff like that. But
Oof.
it's just, it's not like you're just like digging a ditch all day, but like it is like not the
Gru-
most glamorous part.
Grueling. Could be grueling, I would imagine.
Right. And
Yeah.
like you probably wouldn't get the credit like if you were a guy that wins the world title, and like if you're a professional surfer and you win all the events and everything, like the shaper is who's going to get the credit,
Mm.
because you're riding his boards, and then he would probably give credit to the rest of his team that's doing the glassing and all that type of stuff. But it's not as glamorous as the person that shapes a board and has their own label and
Mm.
like this is why you want to buy so and so's board.
Right.
You're not really talking about the glassing.
Mm.
Man, I know that you said 11 days from now you're going to be going out west. What's your favorite place that you've been and had the opportunity to surf?
So I've been to the San Diego area twice, and that's where I'm going back. And on the 23rd, I'm flying out. I'll be there for a week. I mean, the West Coast is just so fun. It's easy. You don't have to have a passport to get there.
Yep.
Everybody speaks English. Coffee's good. The burritos are out of this world. Like, who wouldn't want to go to California? Like I love it out there. Like, I don't want to live there by any means. It's just so fast paced out there, and like I'm definitely a guy where it's like, all right, like 5, 6 o'clock, like the roads start slowing down. You can get wherever you need to go, no issues. But out there, it's just a different ball game. And so I'll be staying in Oceanside with a husband and wife and their little girl that I'm friends with. They're from here. They have connections to the shop as well. And so I'll be staying out there and kind of just surfing like wherever. There's so many waves in Southern California. You can kind of just go wherever you want, and like the way that they surf forecast now, you can get pretty detailed information before you even step foot in your car. You can kind of have a general idea of where you're going to go look and
Mm.
surf. And so, um, like it's still a few days out. So like I've been looking at the forecast and like I don't know exactly where I'll surf, but it will probably be close to Oceanside a lot. Like I've caught really fun waves at Oceanside Pier and Oceanside Harbor.
Hmm.
Super fun right there.
Man, sounds
I've
beautiful.
I've been to
Yeah.
Dana Point twice, and
Okay. Great surf
it's
spot.
yeah. I mean, it was fun just watching the guys and girls out there surfing. Man, it's just mesmerizing. I mean, just watching people hitting these with different waves. I mean, I could do that all day, just sitting there on the beach watching.
Yeah. Yeah. That is the culture out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like everybody you run into is a surfer and even work. Like you're always in the water. Like what's the deal?
Jacob, I don't
Like,
know. I don't know if Ryan told you, but one time I took him down on a mission trip down to Nicaragua, and he was foaming at the mouth for an opportunity to get over to the coast and surf when we were in Nicaragua. And as we were flying in, we were at baggage, picking up our baggage, and there were a handful of people that here come their surfboards, and man, he's like, man, I wish I could. I want to go do that. I hear there's some pretty cool spots down there in Central America over there on the
yeah.
West Coast for surfing.
Yeah. So
And
our owner,
Nicaragua's really cheap, so that's
it
why
is, and it's warm. Like if you want to go and get out of this, like it's not super cold today, but like we've had some pretty chilly days this winter,
right.
and yeah, if you're trying to get out of here and go surfing some board shorts, like by all means.
There you go.
Yeah, Central America's great.
That's awesome. Well, there are some wonderful people down there. I can attest to that. I love
Yeah,
going down there. I take a team down there a couple times a year.
I went
But
down there on a mission trip as well,
that's awesome.
and my sister went. Carrie, me and
Oh
her
yeah,
both went. She went one summer, and I went or I went the first time, and she went the second time. But we were in Las Cedras and Jinotega
cool.
down
Yeah,
there.
I know
Yeah,
where you're talking about.
Hmm.
My goal is to tack on a couple of days one year and go find some tarpon down there with my fly
I was
rod.
hoping you were going to say that. Did you ever watch River Monsters?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've watched
Did
it.
you see that episode where he was fishing for tarpon in the river in a self-propelled kayak?
Yes.
Insane.
Yeah. Those things
Oh
look like
man.
dinosaurs.
I know. And he's just like, dude, what if there's an anaconda in there too? Like, get out of
Yeah.
there.
He's
On a
Like,
dinner.
kayak.
Talking about being the bottom of the food chain. That guy is
yeah, man.
regularly on the
Crazy.
bottom of the food chain.
That's my favorite episode of all time.
Mm.
Yeah.
Love that one. Mhm.
That's amazing. We've talked a lot about, the ins and outs and sort of teaching people and instructing people about surfing and the sport of surfing, because a lot of people are unfamiliar with it. But I would be curious to hear, we hinted a little bit, at a faith aspect of the spiritual side of what you're doing out there. There's a lot of metaphor wrapped around the sport of surfing and the act of surfing. Um, you spend that much time in the water and you've had a lot of experiences. What are some ways that time in and on the ocean has shaped you as a person?
I think it keeps you humble for one. Like you can be surfing really well, and and then, surfing anywhere in the world, you just see so many different faces of whatever body of water you're surfing, like no day is the same and no wave is the same. And so I think it's a very good, humbling, like, I don't know the word, but activity, I guess, just because you can be on your game, and then you have a day where the Gulf is just doing whatever it wants and like you can't really put it together,
Mm,
or you go out there when it's big and you're like, wow, like I'm not as ready as I thought I was,
Mm.
and so it's just good to kind of be brought down a notch if you ever kind of get that big head, I feel like. So humbling for sure. I think like I grew up playing ball sports, like Ryan did. And so, like I said, we've all played sports together growing up, but like I'm a very competitive person, I think it shows itself in different forms, but to have something to be like as an adult, like if you're not playing a professional sport, like I'm only 33, and so like there's guys older than me that are still playing in any professional league, and to not have something as a competitor to kind of channel that,
Mm.
after you get done playing whatever high school or college sport,
yeah,
it's kind of good to just kind of get those juices flowing again, and so that kind of keeps
sure.
me really driven, like Ryan won't agree with this. He doesn't think that he surfs very well because like he's just not able to go as much, like I always applaud him for putting his family first, like he's a husband, he's a dad of three, he cares about his church and his church family, and so he does not push the envelope when it comes to breaking away to surf as much as he would maybe like, but I still think that he's a great surfer. And so when I surf with him,
Ryan is so humble, and
he is.
he's humble. And he would never say that he's a genuinely humble dude. But that Joker's a heck of an athlete.
He is.
There,
He is.
He's a great baseball player. He's a CrossFit monster. He's
No, he's a
jacked.
freak right now.
He's
Like I wouldn't mess with
jacked.
him for nothing right now.
No,
He'd
no
break me
way,
in
no
half.
way, no way. He's jacked, and he's just a genuinely good human being,
Yeah,
And
completely agree.
he's a great pastor. But you're right, he is full of humility. But man, anything that fellow puts his mind to, and it involves physicality and hand-eye coordination and balance, he's going to be good at it. That's just
Yeah, and so like he doesn't think that he surfs as well as he used to, but in my mind, like I'm still thinking of Ryan and like in high school and then when we were in college, and it's like I'm still chasing him whenever he's in the water. It's like,
Mm.
oh, if I see him do something, like I'm gonna try to do it, or I want to do something to make him be like, hey, that was really cool, like, or that was a good whatever, like
Mm.
I'm seeking him to be like, hey, like I'm kind of coming for you, like I really want to like pass you one day.
mm, that's
Mm.
cool.
Man, so we talk about this, you know, the bigness of the ocean and our smallness and things like that. Is there Is there any stories that we talk about this podcast being a digital campfire, essentially, where we tell stories, we kind of swap stories back and forth. Is there anything from your surfing background that has taught you something spiritually or opened your eyes to something deeper, maybe perhaps brought you a deeper understanding of God's like truth, beauty, and goodness in some way?
I think just being out in the water, like no matter what the conditions are, is a very good example of that. Like we were touched on earlier, just kind of feeling that you're as small as you are, and like who am I to like make things all about me when there is a God that's greater,
Mm,
and like everybody always kind of compare like does those some comparisons like when you see a rainbow, like whatever you're going through, like it's kind of like a symbol of God's promises,
mm-hmm.
and so like just being out there and like the sun setting and like it just shows like God loves us, and like he truly does care for us and he desires a relationship with us, and like just kind of being out in the water and like either at dawn or at sunset and just seeing the sky kind of like come alive, like with those morning
Mm,
and evening colors, like there's nothing like being out there when the sun's going down or the sun's coming up. It's the coolest thing to me, and like I always really enjoy those late afternoon sessions, when like you're out there and you're with your friends and you're trading waves and then you have a sunset and it's like it just kind of puts a lot of things into perspective.
Mm.
You're like we're really blessed, like there's a lot to be thankful for, and there's a lot of things in this world that would give a lot of people reason to complain, and be upset. But when you take a step back and it's like you're out there with your best friends and you're doing something you all love, and then you get to see the sunset or the sun come up, like
mm.
there's nothing like it.
Yeah, I was
What?
talking to a guy the other day about that. One of our former guests, actually, Andy Blanks. We're talking about this concept of common grace.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
being able to see those sunrises and those sunsets and just the beauty that is for seemingly no other reason than just for it being beautiful, and
Right.
feeling like that is just kind of a unnecessary goodness that God puts into this world. Um, Man, to
Great
be
way to
able
put it.
to stop and think about that, it's just, and to experience it, you know, waist deep in some type of water, whether it's in the ocean or on a river, or I mean, those are just moments where you just realize that God does care for his people.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then like community is so huge within the church, and like and I'm a firm believer that we're not meant to do life alone,
Hmm.
and so to be able to do something like that, like either fishing with your friends on the river or surfing or whatever the case may be, it's like that's just another symbol, you know what I mean? It's like,
Mm.
man, like I'm doing something that I love with people that truly care about me, my well-being, care about my heart, and like we're doing something that makes us smile ear to ear,
Mm.
you know. It's really cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, I'm trying to imagine like what it would be like to ride, a good size wave. You can really feel. I've certainly felt the hydraulic power of the ocean and experienced that of like you can be utterly helpless, when you're out there trying to swim against it
Mhm.
or with it, And I just think about, as we walk with the Lord, he is all powerful, and when we go against whatever he's doing, it really is like a waste of time.
Big
It's like
time.
trying to fight against the undertow. It's you're not going to win that battle. You're just not. And so it's like trying to find out what direction is the Lord going is going to be usually a little bit easier. And I feel like metaphorically getting up on a big wave has to have that, like you said, a euphoria or an adrenaline rush. And when you get in line with where God is going and where God is moving and pushing, Man, it has to be a similar feeling to tie those things together and go, this is what it feels like to be, um, line in line with what God is doing and where He is going, versus trying to go against Him where nothing seems to be working out.
Yeah.
This is just an utter struggle. I think about that on a bike when I'm riding into a headwind. It's just relentless. And there's just no hope. You feel like you're going nowhere because you aren't going anywhere. You're making a little
Nowhere
headway, but
fast, right?
nowhere fast.
Nowhere fast.
But boy, you turn around, you get that tailwind. It's like, oh, there it is. There it
Yeah.
is.
And the ocean's the same way, like when there's current running down the beach and it's choppy and it's like it's like you want little windshield wipers on your eyeballs because like there's just so much water splashing in your face, It's like, dude, what are we doing out here? Like let's go in,
Yeah,
Oh, that's funny.
that's good. Well, it's coming. It's coming. Have you ever had a shark encounter on your surfboard?
If I'm being completely honest with you, my mindset with sharks is kind of out of sight, out of mind. I'm a firm believer that we're not meant to live in fear, And
Mm.
if you're if you're doing something like surfing that you thoroughly enjoy, but you're worried about potentially getting bit or eaten, like you're not going to be able to surf how you're meant to surf. Like you're kind of supposed to like surf like kind of freely, and like kind of working with what the waves are giving you. And if your mind is focused on something that may not even happen, you're not
Hmm.
going to be able to do it effectively. And so I don't think about it a whole lot here on the Gulf, especially. I don't.
I didn't say did you think about it. I asked you, have you
I
ever
was
had
getting
an
there.
encounter?
I was getting there. Now, when I'm in California, I do think about it a little more because
Oh,
like
I bet.
everybody knows like great whites, like they like that cold water, you know what I
Mm.
mean? And so I've never seen a shark. I think I saw one time years ago out here on the beach. I get Pensacola, but it was kind of small. But like out there, one year I went, we were surfing at Oceanside Pier. And so we're out there, we're having fun. It's me, a guy from here, and the guy that we stay with. And so we're sitting out there, like we're all catching waves. It's not very crowded, super fun size. And so like I look off and like just kind of taking it all in and see people doing this on the beach, like cars, whatever. And I see a boat, kind of just coming towards us, but it's way off in the distance, not going in fast or anything, like no worries. So we just keep surfing, like not really thinking a whole lot of anything other than just surfing, and having fun with your friends and like where are we going to get a burrito next. And so as we're surfing, like this boat continues to come towards us, still at a very slow rate of speed, like less than 5 miles per hour, like just almost like trolling. And so it eventually makes its way like kind of closer to us. And as it's doing that, like kind of coming closer, I catch a longer right. And so like I kind of ride it almost all the way in. And so I walk down to the beach and then I walk back towards the pier to paddle out to kind of like get back in the position that I was wanting to be in. And so as I'm paddling out, there's a group of older guys and they're all bodyboarding. And so I come up by the pier and I kind of go around them so I'm not in their way. And like when you paddle around them, like you're in pretty close proximity, and you can definitely hear what everybody's saying. And I heard one of the guys say, like, I guarantee you that Coast Guard boat was following a shark. And like that boat was like less than 100 yards from us
Oh
towards the
my
end of the
goodness.
pier. And so like obviously I didn't see it, and like I didn't know it at the time, like all I see is a red boat off in the
Mm.
distance kind of coming towards us, but they're not waving us down. They're not on a bullhorn telling us to get out of the water, like just business as usual. And so
Mm,
that was one that sticks in my mind for
oh, I
sure.
bet.
And like then we were surfing. Did you know Ryan went with us one year to
Oh, yeah.
California, but
Yeah.
Ryan and Billy?
Yep.
And so me and Ryan are surfing this one spot called Swami's, right? And so like you check it from this cliff and you look down and it breaks over rocks. It's so like it's this long right hander. And Ryan Pearzine, like I love the dude. He is notorious for saying something about sharks anytime we're in the water. And so and so like
It can be a scaredy cat.
and so we're in the water, right? And so it's not crowded. Like the wind's not very good. Like there's waves, but nobody's like itching to get in the water, like locals. And so, but we're out there. We're from the Gulf. It's like, dude, we gotta go. Like it's our last day. And so we're out there, and like I said, it's breaking over rocks. There's some kelp and stuff. And Ryan looks at me. He's like, "This is kind of sharky, huh?" And so I look at Ryan. I was like, "I've never been mad at you like in my entire life, but
I wasn't even thinking about it.
like I want to hit you in the face right now. Like, why would you do that?" So every
Don't
time I
say
look
that.
down or like my leash touches me, I'm like all jumpy and stuff. Like I don't even know if there's one
Oh,
out there, but like your mind plays tricks on you. You
Oh
know what I
yeah.
mean? So like, but no, to answer your question, I've never been bumped. I've never been ran out of the water or anything. I mean, I've heard stories for
Sure.
sure.
I know that, it's probably one of the more common things, when somebody thinks about surfing, it's like, oh, don't you worry about the sharks?
Well,
So
my argument to that is like, I think the chances of you getting hurt going to the beach or coming home from the beach are so much higher because
hmm.
of everybody that texts and drives.
yeah,
And if you're coming home, like if you surf, like say summertime, for example, when the sun goes down lower or later, and then like you throw in the factor of drinking and driving,
right.
it's like your chances of getting smoked on the road are so much higher than getting bit by a shark, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Yeah. I got the opportunity to take a helicopter ride down the beach one time. And I saw just how many sharks that are out there. And there are, it's not like they're not out there, but it made me realize that what you're saying is correct. If they really wanted to get us, they would get us.
Yeah,
Because the
big
the
time.
rate the ratio of sharks to people is definitely considerably different. And they're in between people. There are folks that are on rafts that are swimming out there, and they're absolutely oblivious to the presence of sharks, however big or small they may be. But you're right, man. I mean, you want to have a healthy respect. You want to be an idiot
Oh, yeah,
either.
for sure. It's like,
But
yeah, if he's fishing, I'm not going to go paddle out right there.
yeah,
Nobody,
yeah,
don't go
chumming
near
in
the
the water.
chum.
Right, right. Fun fact though, did you know that Puerto Rico has never had a recorded shark attack?
Oh, that is a fun fact.
I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
So
There you
I went
go.
down there last
The more
January
you know.
for a surf trip, and like we're just like just doing a little research on whatever, like where we're gonna surf or whatever, and somehow that popped up. And so it's like, oh, like we can surf however long we want. Like it
That's
don't
a
matter what
great
time it is.
stat. That's the best stat I've ever
Yeah.
seen.
The
Yeah. And
odds,
so
the odds are in my favor.
yeah, so if you want to learn to surf and you're afraid of sharks, go down to Puerto Rico. Like,
Puerto Rico. Man,
yeah.
that's amazing. I love that. That's a
Yeah,
good one. That's a good
man,
one.
Jacob. The one of the questions we like to ask our guests is, "What's your next adventure?"
Well, obviously I'm going to California. I don't really plan too far ahead. Like all the managers, we only get certain times of the year off, because I mean, being here on the Gulf Coast, like, I mean, you guys know how touristy it can be, and so
Mhm.
spring break starts in a couple weeks, and then pretty
Right.
much from March all the way through October, we're going to have a representative like every state come through
Yep.
Wow,
the state lines, and
wow.
That's
so
incredible.
um, so we can only take extended time off from like the fall months, but you only have a short window there because once Black Friday hits, Black Friday through Christmas Eve will be slammed at
Hmm.
Innerlight. And so you kind of have a short window in September, October, and early November. And then after that, like January, February is your time to where you can take time off. And so I don't really plan too far ahead until I start getting closer to that, trying to figure out where I'm going to go,
That's
to
good.
take a trip. But so yeah, I mean, I basically would say California.
That
Good
sounds
enough.
awesome. That's gonna
Sounds
be
good. Sounds
great.
like an adventure to me.
Yeah, and then I got some other places I'd like to get to one day, but like I don't have anything in
What's
solid
what's
concrete
one of
right
those places when you're like this is the place that I really want to go surf one day at
you
least
got.
once in my
I
life.
don't know if I want to surf it. I mean, I say I want to surf, like you kind of have to at some point, but like you got to go to North Shore and see like Pipeline do its thing. And like I would love
Mm.
to go there in the wintertime when it's just giant and
Mm.
sit on the beach and just wipe drool off my chin, Just like I can't fathom seeing the ocean do that, and then seeing guys being able to like know exactly where to be at and what to do
Mm.
on a wave that's that powerful, knowing that there's a reef that's less than 3 feet like deep under you,
Oof.
and like they're so dialed, and I would just love to see that in person.
Mm.
So Hawaii is for sure on my list. Like I'm gonna go one day. I don't know when, but I'm going for
That's
sure.
awesome,
Man,
man.
I
Some of
hope.
those, I mean, there are lots of videos out there. Like I've seen where those guys they get pulled to these waves on like a jet ski or something,
Yeah. They have one
and
of those in Puerto Rico and it's insane. Like we
Mm.
and
paddled out there and like knowing that it was a tow-in spot and it was so big. It's one of the biggest sets I've ever seen. I'm like straight at us. I was like, I'm gonna die out here. Like it was so big, and just knowing that that was like child's play. Like they weren't even doing tow-ins there.
wow,
And knowing that it
Wow.
can get like 20 foot and they're just going for it. It's
No
crazy.
shark attacks, but the
but
waves
no
have
Yeah.
shark
taken a
attacks.
few.
But the
There you
way
go.
we've had some drownings.
There you go.
Is there on a serious note, has there ever been like a really scary moment where you did get like pressed by a wave and it really scared you?
Being held down is a very, very weird feeling. So
Mm.
like it's I think it feels like when you're underwater longer than what it truly is. But surfing's so different, like it's not like basketball or football or whatever, like our playing surface is always moving, and at some point you're not gonna breathe normally because you're
Mm.
gonna be underwater.
Right.
And so like if you were to go hold your breath for however long, you can prepare for that. You can get a couple deep breaths and stuff. But like when you're surfing, like it's not like an all out sprint like basketball or football where your heart rate's constantly elevated and you're having to like kind of catch your breath from time to time.
Mm.
So you do get a couple breaks, but there's not, it doesn't always work out to where you can take a good deep breath before you go underwater. And so that's when it can get scary,
Mm.
like you haven't taken a deep breath and you're getting ragdolled underwater, and then you're coming up and you're like, dude, I should be hitting the surface by now, and you haven't. Like that's when it can get a little nerve wracking for sure. And like hurricane swells can always be weird, like that can really like just feeling the power that can come through there when you're not used to it, and like I
Mhm.
felt that in Puerto Rico. Like that's like poor man's Hawaii down there. It's just surrounded by the ocean. So you can get swell year round, and
Wow.
just feeling open ocean come down on you, like it's just like, so yeah, like I've been very shook up out there.
Mm.
Like it doesn't take a whole lot when you're in a place that you're unfamiliar with, and
Yeah.
like it's big time surf coming in, like it's a very humbling feeling, and like it almost makes you want to work hard to like kind of be prepared for that too, in a way, like kind of put the time in to surf as much as you can leading up to a trip so that you know that you're in surf shape,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah. I
Well,
guess.
it
I
gives me a little
guess.
anxiety.
I know.
Yeah.
Every
My
time I
mom
see
doesn't need to hear
somebody,
that one.
Yeah.
every time I see somebody go underwater on a movie, I try to hold my breath to see if I could make it like to the next scene, like when they come
Right.
up for air. And I'm sitting here just like my heart's racing, thinking of getting held down by a wave.
Yeah, it's
Oh
weird. Like
gosh.
you'll fall and like you
Ugh.
just like you're doing all these flips and stuff, and like you're just then you got to come up, and like as you're swimming you're like, I hope there's not another wave that's about to come down on top of that one, because
Mm.
that's when it really gets dangerous, is when you get held down by more than one wave consecutively,
Hmm.
and then you're having to like stay calm underwater obviously, and then hope that you come up to not another wave coming down. Like you hear about
Woof.
those stories all like in Hawaii, and like when they're surfing serious like heavy duty waves where like they'll talk about like 3 wave hold downs and something insane. And it's just
Oof.
like, dude, no, thank you.
Mm.
You ever had a moment where you're like, I think I'm gonna go to the beach for a little while. I think I'm gonna go sit. I'm gonna sit,
Yeah, it happened the
get a
other
spell.
day. Like
That
it
umbrella is
happened the
looking
other
pretty
day.
nice.
Like we had some swell come in. It was a couple weeks ago. Like it got so big, like out of nowhere. And it was 3 of us out of the pier, or 4 of us. And like our sandbar had shifted some. And so like at Christmas time, we had a really good swell. Like it was big. but it was kind of like just a little soft, like kind of roll in almost, like real easy drop. But once we had all that cold weather come in, all the north wind shifted the sand like out. And so that outside sandbar got shallower than what it was prior to that. And so that means like
Oh,
when the wave comes in, it stands up so much quicker. And so like it's more of like a vertical takeoff, like you're kind of coming down like straight instead of like a y'all get what I mean when like you roll in, like you're
Hmm.
kind of
oh
just
yeah.
yeah.
I'm
So like it would
picturing
kind
it.
of be like that
Yep.
instead of like vertical. And like I was looking at something like, dude, I'm gonna like get smoked out here. And like it was kind of like big and unruly, like there was some big sets. Like we were at the very end of the pier. And I was so shook up. Like at first, like I got pounded when I paddled out, and like somebody said that that was the biggest set of the day that they'd seen. And I took it straight on the head. It was like four waves, and so I think I was just kind of like in my head at that point. But like I went in. I was like, man, I'm a liability out here. Like I can't even relax. So like, yeah, I went in for sure.
Yeah,
Mm.
tapping out. Yeah.
You
So
got
I
to know your
suppose
limits.
got to know your limits. I suppose it's like riding a horse, though. You fall off, you gotta get back on, huh?
yeah, I mean, yeah, but in a sense, like you got to be smart too. You know what I mean? Like know your limits, but you can't always like you got to push the envelope at some point too. Like I mean
Yeah.
that's progression, in a sport. You can't be afraid to try. So
That's
it's
good.
a really fine line to walk for
That's good.
sure.
Mm.
Man, I really think there's so much curiosity. I think we could probably talk all evening.
I mean, I
Uh,
could have 100 more questions. I mean, this is
yeah,
such a world that I'm not familiar with.
Go
absolutely.
for it whenever
But
you
it's
want.
really, really cool conversation. I really appreciate you taking time to sit
Yeah.
down with us,
I'm
share a little bit, give people a little taste of what it is to be a surfer and surfing, and maybe somebody wants to get into it, which would be really cool.
yeah.
And for Innerlight for the shop, do you guys have an online store, or is there anything like that people can support? Where can they find you if if you come down to Pensacola Beach or down to Destin,
Yeah.
we can put all that in the show notes. Just, however we can support you, let us know how we can do that. We'll put that in the show
Man,
notes.
that would mean so much for y'all to do that. I mean, like I said, working for a small business is so great. And like I'm really fortunate to be in the position that I am within small business. But it's such a battle with online shopping and
Hmm.
Amazon, like
Sure.
it's such a it's almost like the deck's just stacked against you, but I think we do a really great job um, building relationships with customers. I think that's why Interlight has stood 50 years, and we've been around
Mhm.
as long as we have because we pride ourselves on not just like, hey, we want to sell you the most expensive board in the shop or board shorts or whatever the case may be. Like, let's
Right.
get to know you, and then like build that relationship from there.
That's
And
good.
so, like that, I really appreciate you guys wanting to do that. But we do have an online store. It's just innerlightsurf.com.
Sweet.
INNERLIGHT surf.com. It does have just a lot of our shop t-shirts on there, like shop logos and stuff, but it is a third party. And so if you were to look on there and you see a certain logo in a certain color and you call the shop looking for it, or you ordered it and you come in to the shop wanting a different size for an exchange or something, we probably don't have it because it did come from a third party. We might have
Yeah.
something
Makes
similar,
sense.
but we do have lots to choose from. And so I would just say to keep that in mind if you do shop online.
Yeah.
But we do have shops in Pensacola. We do have one in the downtown area on Palafox. I know a lot of tourists do come through there. And there's always something to do downtown. The
For
Wahoos
sure.
are there, restaurants are there, coffee shops, like you name it can be found down there. And then Gulf Breeze is right next to Pensacola Beach. So more times than not, people coming from out of town would have to drive through Gulf Breeze to get to Pensacola Beach. And so they would drive right by the shop to see that. And then our store in Destin, if you guys have been to the Destin Commons, we are actually right over there now. We were down on Highway 98 for several years, but we were able to get into the Destin Commons a few years back. And
Nice.
so
Very
we've been in
nice.
there ever since.
Cool.
So, man, I mean, if our listeners are listening and they're vacationing down there this summer, I hope they can come by and support the shop.
Yeah, it would
And
mean a lot.
or maybe and maybe we can put the surf camp's pretty cool. Maybe we can put the you can send me the dates for surf camp if that's something somebody's really interested
Yeah.
in, we can also put that on the show notes for people to, maybe they want to do a vacation down there for surf camp, which would be cool if
Yeah.
you always wanted to learn how to surf, right?
Yeah, we have so many out of towners come through every summer. Like last year, we did 10 weeks of camp. It's a 3-day camp. And so I would say it's more out of towners than locals, or even maybe
Cool.
split half and half. We haven't released dates yet, but you would sign up on that same website. If you were to go shop, you would do the same website to do surf camp. We are going to release those the end of this month. One of the ladies I mentioned earlier, our operations manager, she's going down to Costa Rica with her family for her week vacation, and so she wants to have prime internet connection before she releases those dates. And so
Understood.
when she comes back, it'll be doors wide open. So
cool. Well, great. Well, just give me a little heads up on that. We'll make sure that makes it.
I appreciate that.
Into the notes, you bet. Man, what a great conversation. Really, I love, when we made this podcast and decided we wanted to do it, we wanted to keep it real broad. And if it happens outdoors, it's fair game. And so, man, it's really great to have someone from the surfing community. Especially I live down here on the Gulf Coast. Brian lives up in Birmingham, so he's not catching too many waves up there in Birmingham. But down here in Mobile and Gulf Shores and Pensacola, there's a lot of folks that might want to take you up on that. So, man, what a great conversation. And I love the idea of the humility that it brings. Man, we all need that. And man, what a great way to learn that, and a great activity, honestly, man. I mean, it just keeps you in shape, and it's really cool sport. So, man, I really appreciate you sharing about, the things you've learned and sharing your story with us. We hope this conversation challenges people and encourages people to write their own stories and share their own adventures in the place we love to call the storied outdoors.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Like it's been really cool, something to look forward to for sure. And you guys are doing great. I think it's good that y'all are kind of trying to channel that outlet. It's y'all seem a little more unique in certain areas than others. And so I think y'all are doing a great job. And I'm stoked to be on here.
Thanks a lot, man.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please take some time to leave us a review, or better yet, share it with a friend. We hope these stories encourage you to write your own stories and share your own adventures in the storied outdoors.